Welcome to our studio, Crusade for Freedom, located in the heartland of America. Our desire is to be a symbol of hope by spreading the message of freedom to millions. We encourage everyone to visit our website at crusadeforfreedom.com. That's crusade, the number 4, freedom.com. Please be sure to subscribe to our website and like us on Facebook. We are so glad you stopped by today and hope you will keep coming back.
Hello, America. This show you must watch from beginning to end. My great guest, Peter Schweizer. How are you?
Great to be here.
You're in great demand, except on CNN, MSNBC, CBS, ABC, and the rest of them. You wrote this book, Secret Empires, in which you broke a number of stories, including the Joe and Hunter Biden, I'll call corruption story, involving Ukraine. So here's what I want to do tonight. I want to walk through everything you know about the Bidens in Ukraine. Then I want to walk through everything you know about the Bidens in China. So the American people who watch this program are aware of it, because they're not getting any of this in the New York Times and the Washington Post or any of the cable networks, where you are basically being prevented from explaining what took place. Then I want to talk about what to me is a nonsensical hullabaloo about the President of the United States, the transcript, and all the rest of that. So let's walk through it. Let's begin with the Bidens in Ukraine from the top.
Well, Hunter Biden is Joe Biden's son, the son that's still alive. He lost Beau Biden tragically. And up until his father became vice president, he was basically a lobbyist in Washington, D.C., working for the online gambling industry. So he had no background overseas in any of these areas. Once his father became vice president, he started this private investment firm called Rosemont Seneca Partners. Half the capital was provided by Chris Hines, who's John Kerry's stepson, and another business partner was brought in, who was John Kerry's finance co-chair in 2004. The Ukraine part of this really begins in 2014, Mark. In February of 2014, you'll remember the pro-Russian president Yanukovych is driven from power. Putin starts flexing his muscles. Russian military forces get involved. That's in February of 2014. The Obama administration responds by saying, we are going to come and help Ukraine. And very significantly, the point person on Obama administration policy is Vice President Joe Biden, who goes to Ukraine almost immediately. 2 months after Yanukovych is driven from power and the Russian forces start to invade, a Ukrainian energy company called Burisma decides it's a great idea to hire the vice president's son as a consultant, advisor, and board member. Now, what's important, Mark, to note is that Hunter Biden has no background in energy. He has no background in Ukraine. He's being hired to help them with regulatory compliance. I don't know how he's going to help them with that. But that's really not the reason that he was hired.
To this day, do we know anything that he did? Do we know what he did for this company?
No, we don't know. He made a couple appearances at energy conferences. That's all that he did. But
what was he being paid?
He was being paid $83,000 a month, which was being transferred into financial records in Morgan Stanley, an account there. So we know the precise amount he was paid because we have those documents. Hunter Biden's business partner, who was also on the board of Burisma, Devin Archer, was charged with financial fraud in 2016. And as a result of that prosecution, those financial records came to light. So there's no ambiguity here. We know precisely how much he was being paid. And to keep in mind that Burisma is a corrupt company. It's probably the most corrupt company in Ukraine. There were lots of Western firms that would not even deal with them, partly because it was headed by this Ukrainian oligarch named Zlochevsky, who was the former energy minister in the Yanukovych government. And he basically created Burisma by stealing assets, state assets, and putting them into his own company.
So he steals state assets, Ukrainian funds.
Right.
Puts them in his own company.
Right.
The company that hires Hunter Biden.
Correct.
Who's on the board of this company?
It's basically Ukrainians, and then the former president of Poland, which there's all kinds of questions about what energy deals were in play there. But this was a company that Western capital firms did not want to get involved in because they were concerned about irregularities. And when Hunter Biden joined the board, the Serious Fraud Office in the UK, which handles matters very seriously, had actually frozen Zlochevsky's assets in bank accounts because of money laundering, all sorts of other serious allegations. So the point is Hunter Biden joined forces with a very corrupt oligarch, got a big payday, and he got a payday that he didn't deserve, Mark, because he wasn't selling his expertise. He had none. And the key question here that nobody seems to want to ask in the media is, what was he being paid for? He wasn't being paid for his expertise. What was he being paid for? And what were the Ukrainians expecting to get in return? And I think when you overlay the financial payments with the fact that Joe Biden, as point person on Obama administration policy to Ukraine, was steering billions of dollars of Western money to Ukraine, it becomes crystal clear exactly why they were paying him money. They wanted access and they wanted to influence Joe Biden. And Joe Biden's been around a long time, and he had to know exactly why his son was being paid.
Well, let me ask you about that. I saw some liberal so-called reporter who said there was a rule the Bidens had, that Hunter never told his father, the vice president, what kind of business he was involved in.
Right.
And even though it later was in the press, Burisma and Hunter Biden's role and so forth, largely you're responsible for it and some others, that there's no evidence that Joe Biden actually read the newspaper.
Right.
So it's simply not conceivable, is it, that Joe Biden wouldn't know what his son was up to?
Right, exactly. I mean, first of all, if he had been point person on Ukraine policy, which he was, he would know about Burisma, because Burisma was a major energy producer. Energy was a key component of Ukraine coming back. And in fact, Joe Biden was responsible for a USAID program designed to rejuvenate the energy sector, of which Burisma would benefit. But we also know, based on an interview that Hunter Biden gave to The New Yorker, that in fact, he did talk to his dad about this. And according to Hunter Biden, his father told him, I hope you know what you're doing. So, even his son has contradicted.
And a few weeks ago, Joe Biden said he never discussed it with his son in response to Peter Doocy of Fox.
Correct.
He got very angry.
Yes, that's exactly right.
So Joe Biden knows about the prosecutor.
Yeah.
He knows about the company.
Yeah.
He knows the company's corrupt. He claims the prosecutor's corrupt, maybe right or wrong.
Yeah.
And there's this phone conversation where Joe Biden, the Vice President of the United States, is saying what to whom about the prosecutor?
Well, he's telling the president of the Ukraine that, look, I'm not going to give you this $1 billion of Western aid. Remember, he's the guy that calls the shots here. I'm not giving you this $1 billion of aid unless you fire that prosecutor.
Who's investigating the company, Burisma?
Correct.
And by extension, you would think, potentially, his son.
Correct. Yes, that's
and
exactly
potentially,
right.
For that matter, John Kerry's stepson.
Yes.
Who knows?
I mean, it's hard to know exactly what he was investigating. We know he was investigating Burisma, and we know that based on some reporting from John Solomon that investigation involved Hunter Biden. But, look, to me, the bottom line here is Hunter Biden was hired. Why? My contention is he wasn't hired for his expertise. He was hired precisely because Zlochevsky, who ran and controlled Burisma, was in trouble. The Brits had seized his assets. The United States and others were raising questions about corruption in Ukraine, and he wanted out of the fix. So whether Hunter Biden at that point in time was directly being investigated is immaterial. The fact is Zlochevsky was. And the bottom line is the Ukrainians buckled and fired the prosecutor. Now, to the claim that he was a corrupt prosecutor, who knows? Again, it's irrelevant.
Let me ask you a question. Why does that matter?
Exactly.
You're the Vice President of the United States. We're hearing the Democrats today talking about affecting a foreign investigation.
Right.
Biden affected a foreign investigation, whether he thinks the prosecutor is corrupt or not. The President of the United States thought Mueller was conflicted up the wazoo, but the Democrats would never have accepted the fact if he fired Mueller. So you actually have Biden reaching into the Ukraine, demanding that they fire this prosecutor, who's investigating the company that his son is tied to and blackmailing them.
Right.
You want $1 billion in American aid, you'll get rid of that guy. And what does he say? I've got 6 hours. This is on tape. I've got 6 hours. He needs to be gone. And he brags at the Council of Foreign Relations event a year ago or so.
Yes.
That's exactly what they did.
Right.
Now, let me ask you a question. You've pretty much written about all this.
Yes.
Have you been contacted by a single Democrat chairman in the House of Representatives to testify?
No.
Not by Jerry Nadler?
No.
Not by Elijah Cummings?
No.
Have you been asked to sit down with Nancy Pelosi to discuss your findings?
No.
Have you been asked by a single Republican chairman, let's start with the Senate Intelligence Committee, to meet with them?
No.
How about the Senate Judiciary Committee?
No.
How about the Senate Foreign Relations Committee?
No.
Nobody wants to talk to you.
That's right. That's
and
right.
you have information.
Yes.
That has been corroborated now.
Correct.
And nobody cares.
Yeah, and nobody cares. And this is the challenge we face, Mark, with a lot of these issues. And you've talked about this really, throughout your public life. The challenge with these kinds of issues is, in Joe Biden's case, Ukraine, China, which we'll talk about later, it's systematic, it's massive and corrupt, and I think unprecedented. But there are lots of people in this town on both sides of the aisle that play the same game. And here's the dilemma you have. If you, let's say, happen to be a Republican congressman from somewhere, maybe you're in this game, or maybe you want to get in this game. Well, if you call out Joe Biden, you immediately close off avenues for your own family to become wealthy. It's one of the most popular common games in Washington.
Do you have any expectation that any of these 6 chairmen handpicked by Nancy Pelosi with her phony impeachment inquiry, because they want to vote on the floor of the House, will call you to testify?
No.
When we come back, I have a question for you. We have a letter here dated May 4, 2018, on United States Senate stationery to the general prosecutor, another general prosecutor of the Ukraine, signed by Dick Durbin, the number 3 Democrat in the United States Senate, works for Schumer, signed by Patrick Leahy, the oldest serving member, the longest serving member of the United States Senate, and Robert Menendez, who I believe is the ranking Democrat on the Foreign Affairs Committee, threatening the Ukraine that if they don't assist Robert Mueller in his investigation involving the President of the United States, that there may be a price to pay. I want to get into this letter with you and ask you about the hypocrisy of the Democrat Party and, quite frankly, the media in its coverage of this matter. It was brought to my attention in the public by Mark Thiessen in a column in the Washington Post, not by investigative reporters at any of these newspapers and so forth. So I want to pursue that when we come back. Folks, don't forget, you can watch me on Levin TV, most weeknights. Just go to blazetv.com/Mark to sign up, blazetv.com/Mark, or give us a call at 844-LEVIN-TV, 844-LEVIN-TV. This is a great book, Secret Empires by Peter. I hope you'll acquire your copy. And this book, too, about our wonderful media, Unfreedom of the Press. I hope you'll get your copy as well. We'll be right back. Peter Schweizer, we have this letter, as I mentioned, May 4, 2018, from Durbin, Menendez, and Leahy, 3 longtime serving Democrat senators. They have no compunction whatsoever about contacting the general prosecutor in the Ukraine to stiff-arm him, to make demands, very explicit demands, unlike the President of the United States in the transcript that we'll get to in a moment that the public has seen over the course of the last few days. And in part it says, on May 2, the New York Times reported that your office effectively froze investigations into 4 open cases in Ukraine in April, thereby eliminating scope for cooperation with the Mueller probe into related issues. So they're trying to juice the prosecutor to work with Mueller. They go on later. Blocking cooperation with the Mueller probe potentially cuts off a significant opportunity for Ukrainian law enforcement to conduct a more thorough inquiry into possible crimes committed during the prior president's administration. Isn't that kind of what the president's saying?
Right.
About Biden?
Yeah. No, that's exactly right.
And then they appoint, just in case the general prosecutor